There's a question quietly catching veterans off guard. It sounds harmless, like something you might hear in any routine checkup. But answer it the wrong way, even slightly, and it could trigger a chain reaction that threatens the benefits you've worked so hard to earn. You might think, it's just an interview. I'll be honest, and everything will be fine. But what most veterans don't realize is that certain answers, even casual ones, can flag your file for re-examination, sometimes without warning and sometimes without cause. And once that happens, you're no longer just updating paperwork, you're fighting to keep what's already yours. In this video, we're going to break down the one interview question that's quietly putting veterans at risk and what you can do to avoid becoming the next target. Because if you're not prepared for how to answer it, your benefits, your rating, and your financial security could all be on the line. Stay with me until the end, because by the time we're done, you'll know how to recognize the trap, avoid common mistakes, and protect yourself from a system that's more calculated than most people think. Let's get into it. It usually starts with something that feels almost friendly. How are you doing these days? Or, would you say your condition has improved, stayed the same, or gotten worse? On the surface, it sounds like concern, like the VA just wants to check in. But underneath that polite phrasing is a loaded trap, and how you respond can trigger a C&P exam, a re-examination request, or even a proposal to reduce your rating. The problem is subtle. Most veterans, being honest and wanting to appear reasonable, might say something like, "I've been doing okay," or "some days are better than others." It feels harmless to say that. In fact, it feels like the responsible answer. But in the VA system, that kind of statement can be interpreted as improvement, even when that's not what you meant. You might have meant, "I'm surviving, but it's still hard." What they may hear is, "He's getting better. Time to reassess." This one question has triggered countless re-examinations, especially during routine evaluations or over-the-phone check-ins. And here's what most veterans aren't told. If you're considered stable, or if your condition hasn't worsened in a measurable way, the VA might start reviewing whether you still meet the criteria for your current rating. You don't even need to request a change. They can open the case themselves. And once it's opened, everything is back on the table. This is why many veterans with long-standing ratings suddenly find themselves being called in for surprise exams, or worse, receiving letters that suggest a rating reduction. And often, it all started with that one answer they thought was just being polite. The truth is, this isn't about being dishonest. It's about being precise. You're not being asked these questions casually. Every answer goes in your file, and that file determines the future of your benefits. So when they ask how you're doing, you need to respond in a way that clearly reflects your true functional limits, without leaving room for misinterpretation. Because what feels like small talk in the moment could be the first step toward losing something you've spent years trying to earn. And the next thing you say may matter more than you think. For many veterans, the phrase "routine future exam" doesn't raise alarms until it does. These exams are often scheduled automatically, especially for conditions that the VA classifies as potentially temporary or improving. That might include anything from mental health disorders like PTSD and anxiety to orthopedic injuries, migraines, or even sleep apnea. But here's what most don't realize. The VA doesn't need a dramatic change in your health to trigger a review, just a reason to question whether your condition is still as disabling as it was when you were first rated. And that reason? It can come from something as minor as a note in your file, a statement during a routine check-in, or a phrase from a third-party evaluation. Once that seed is planted, the system begins looking for confirmation that a reevaluation is warranted. The official reason may be phrased politely: to ensure continued eligibility. But make no mistake, once a review is initiated, your entire record is back under the microscope. Even if your condition hasn't improved, the burden falls on you to prove that. And this is where many veterans get caught off guard. They assume their past records will speak for themselves. But during a reexamination, the VA is looking for new evidence that your disability remains unchanged or has worsened. If that evidence isn't clear or recent, they may assume improvement by default. Veterans often report that these routine exams don't feel routine at all. Some are rushed, others lack context, and many are conducted by providers who don't specialize in the conditions being evaluated. Worse, the language used in your own statements, whether to your doctor, a nurse, or even in an unrelated benefits application, can be used as justification for the review. This is why precision matters. If you're vague, optimistic, or overly casual in how you describe your condition, the VA may interpret that as evidence of recovery. And once the process begins, it's not easy to stop. You'll need documentation, often new evaluations, and sometimes legal support to maintain your current rating. So when you hear the words routine review, remember, there's nothing routine about having to reprove the impact of your disability. It's not about paranoia, it's about preparation. Because understanding the hidden patterns behind these reviews can be the difference between protecting your benefits or watching them quietly disappear. It sounds harmless enough. How are you doing lately? It might come from a primary care doctor, a VA mental health professional, or even a contract examiner during a routine appointment. But this one question, often delivered with a smile and zero context, has quietly become one of the most dangerous moments in a veteran's entire benefits process. Why? Because how you answer it can trigger a re-examination you never saw coming. Let's say you respond with, "I'm doing better," or "Things have been a lot smoother lately." You might mean that your symptoms are more manageable this week, or that you found a temporary coping mechanism. But that's not how it's always interpreted in your file. Instead, those words can be documented as signs of sustained improvement. And just like that, the VA has a justification for flagging your case. What's even more frustrating is that veterans are often just trying to be polite or honest. Many don't want to come across as complainers. Some feel uncomfortable constantly revisiting trauma or symptoms. And others genuinely believe that being optimistic will reflect well on them. But inside the VA system, vague positivity can work against you. This isn't paranoia, it's pattern recognition. Veterans who've had their ratings reduced or claims reopened often discover too late that their own casual words played a role. And once those comments are in your record, they're incredibly hard to undo. A single phrase can override years of documented evidence if it suggests your condition might be improving. So what can you do? Start by being honest, completely honest. If you're still experiencing symptoms, say so clearly and consistently. If something has improved, make sure to explain that it's temporary, context-specific, or dependent on treatment. For example, instead of saying, "I'm doing better," you might say, "I'm having a few good days, but the underlying issues are still affecting me daily." It might feel uncomfortable, but clarity is your best defense. Because the VA isn't just listening to what you say, they're reading into what you don't say. And one vague answer to one harmless question could put everything you've earned at risk. And what happens when that single moment turns into a full re-examination? We'll get to that next. And the consequences aren't always what veterans expect. When the VA flags your case for re-examination, they might call it a routine update or a standard follow-up. But let's be clear, there is nothing routine about it, especially if you've been stable for years. For many veterans, a re-examination isn't just another box to check, it's the beginning of a process that could quietly dismantle their entire disability rating. Here's how it usually plays out. You get a notice. Sometimes it's clear, other times it's vague. It might mention a C&P exam or suggest they're just verifying your current condition. But what's really happening is this. Your file has been flagged for review, usually based on something that triggered a change in condition. That change could be from a doctor's note, a positive-sounding statement you made during a visit, or even automated red flags based on how long you've held a certain rating. Once flagged, you'll likely be scheduled for a compensation and pension (C&P) exam. And this exam isn't just a check-in, it's a full evaluation with serious weight. Everything you say, how you behave, even how you physically present, can be interpreted, recorded, and used to determine whether your benefits will continue at the same level. Some veterans walk in thinking it's no big deal. Others try to tough it out during the exam, minimizing symptoms because they don't want to seem weak. But both of those approaches can backfire, because the examiner isn't necessarily on your side. In many cases, these exams are conducted by third-party contractors who are under pressure to be efficient, which can mean checking off boxes quickly and missing context that matters. Worse, once the exam is over, you often don't get a chance to explain or correct what was written about you. If your condition appears improved, even temporarily, the VA can initiate a rating reduction, and unless you challenge it quickly, with evidence, you might lose benefits you've relied on for years. So let's be clear, a reexamination is never just routine. It's a moment that requires preparation, clarity, and honesty, because the outcome can change everything. In the next section, we're going to break down exactly what the VA looks for during these reviews and how to protect yourself from assumptions that could cost you your claim. Stay with me. Most veterans assume that if their symptoms haven't changed, their benefits should remain untouched. But what many don't realize is that the VA doesn't just look at what you say. They focus heavily on how you function. And buried deep in the VA's evaluation process are specific criteria that can silently work against you if you're not careful. For starters, the VA doesn't need proof that you're completely healed. They just need sufficient evidence of improvement under ordinary conditions of life and work. Sounds vague, right? That's exactly why it's so dangerous. If you casually mention that you've been working part-time, volunteering, or even helping out around the house more than usual, that can be interpreted as a sign of improvement, even if your symptoms haven't changed at all. Take a moment to really think about that. You might still be in pain, still struggling with sleep, still battling anxiety or chronic fatigue. But if your activity level, behavior, or daily routine appears normal enough to an evaluator, they can assume you're better, and your benefits may be reduced accordingly. Another trap? The snapshot nature of VA exams. These assessments are usually short, sometimes only 15 to 30 minutes. The examiner doesn't live with your condition. They're forming judgments based on a quick interview, a checklist, and maybe a couple of physical observations. So if you're having a decent day, or if you push through discomfort to appear polite or cooperative, it might actually hurt your case. And then there's the issue of language. The VA pays close attention to phrases like no longer affecting employment, condition stable, or responds well to treatment. If any of these pop up in your medical notes, even if they don't reflect your full reality, they can trigger a review. Many veterans are shocked to learn their own doctors unintentionally used language that set off alarms, even when the condition hadn't improved at all. The VA's system was built to detect change, not necessarily to understand context. That means it's your responsibility to make sure the full truth is clearly documented. Every symptom, every limitation, every struggle that still affects your day-to-day life. Because here's the bottom line, the VA doesn't need perfect proof to decide you're better. They just need enough surface-level evidence to justify a second look. And unless you're prepared, that second look can become a serious problem. Coming up next, we'll talk about what you can do before, during, and after a reexamination to protect your rating and keep your benefits safe. Don't miss it. When it comes to compensation and pension exams, the most important thing isn't just showing up. It's knowing exactly what to say and what to leave out. Because the truth is, the words you use in that short interview can make or break your VA disability claim. And most veterans have no idea how high the stakes really are. Let's start with what many get wrong: downplaying. Veterans are trained to tough things out, to adapt, to push through pain without making a scene. So when a VA examiner asks, "How are you doing today?" a lot of veterans respond with something like, "I'm doing okay," or "not too bad." That might seem polite or harmless, but those words are often documented and used to suggest that your condition isn't as serious as your records claim. Here's what most don't realize. The exam isn't casual. It's not a conversation. It's an evaluation, one that's going into your official record. Every answer you give is being weighed and recorded. If you tell them your PTSD is under control or that your back pain isn't as bad as last week, they may write down "condition improved," even if you're still suffering every day. Another common mistake? Guessing. If the examiner asks, "How far can you walk before needing a break?" or "How many panic attacks have you had this month?" don't make up a number just to be helpful. Be honest, but be precise. If you're unsure, say that. Let them know the difficulty is unpredictable. Why? Because vague or inconsistent answers are one of the top reasons for rating reductions. Also, watch for the trap questions, the ones designed to test how your reported symptoms line up with your behavior. For example, if you claim you struggle with depression but come across as upbeat and talkative, they might note a disconnect in your demeanor. If you say your mobility is limited but you walked into the room without visible effort, that could raise red flags. This doesn't mean you should exaggerate or act differently, but it does mean you need to clearly explain how you're feeling and what effort it takes to function at that moment. Here's the key. Always describe your worst days, not your best ones. The VA rates your condition based on how severely it limits you, not how well you're doing when things happen to be going smoothly. So, if your migraines knock you out twice a week, but you're okay today, say that. If your anxiety keeps you housebound some days, don't let today's ability to attend the exam define your baseline. Lastly, never assume the examiner knows your full medical history. Bring documentation. Be specific. If your symptoms have worsened or remained the same, say so clearly. And don't be afraid to pause, gather your thoughts, and take the time to answer carefully. Because once that exam is over, your words are in the system, and undoing a misunderstood statement can be a long, frustrating uphill battle. Coming up in the final section, we'll break down exactly what steps you can take if you've already been flagged for re-examination, and how to fight back if your benefits are at risk. If you've already been flagged for a re-examination, don't panic, but don't stay passive either, because what you do next could mean the difference between keeping the benefits you deserve or watching them vanish overnight. The good news? You're not powerless, but the clock might already be ticking. First, understand what a re-examination really means. It doesn't always signal trouble, but it often does. In many cases, it means the VA is reviewing your file because they believe your condition may have improved. Sometimes it's triggered by an internal audit. Sometimes it's due to something you said during a routine visit or CNP exam, and sometimes it comes down to the words in a single progress note or questionnaire. That's why this process can feel so unfair, because you often don't see it coming. If you've received a letter scheduling a new exam, don't ignore it. Missing a re-exam can lead to an automatic reduction or termination of benefits. Show up, be prepared. But more importantly, know what's already in your file. Request a copy of your C file. Read your prior DBQs and progress notes. You need to know what the VA is basing their review on before you walk into that room again. Next, document everything. If your condition hasn't improved, or if it's worsened, get updated medical records. Have your doctor fill out a new Disability Benefits Questionnaire, DBQ, that clearly outlines your symptoms and limitations. Make sure it reflects your worst days, not just the average ones. The more specific, the better. And don't go through this alone. Reach out to a VA-accredited representative, someone who knows how to navigate these situations. It could be a VSO, an attorney, or an independent claims consultant. Their insight could prevent a simple mistake from becoming a costly error. Now, if you've already been through the re-exam and received a proposal to reduce or terminate your benefits, know this: you have the right to respond. It's called a due process period, and you typically have 30 days to submit evidence and arguments to challenge the proposed change. This is your chance to fight back, to show that your condition hasn't improved or that the re-exam was flawed. And if they move forward with the reduction anyway, you can still appeal. Don't assume it's final. Many veterans successfully appeal unfair reductions, especially when they provide strong medical evidence and personal statements that clearly explain how their condition affects their daily life. Bottom line? Getting flagged isn't the end of the road, but silence, hesitation, or the wrong response can cost you dearly. So take it seriously, ask questions, get help, and most importantly, take action fast, because the longer you wait, the harder it becomes to reverse the damage. This isn't just about one question at a VA appointment. It's about a system where your words, sometimes just one sentence, can determine whether you keep the benefits you earned through sacrifice, service, and hardship. What's most troubling is that many veterans don't even realize what triggered their re-exam until it's too late. And by then, the burden of proof shifts entirely onto you. But here's the truth. You have more control than you think. The way you prepare, the records you keep, and the awareness you bring to every VA interaction. It all matters. Every form you sign, every answer you give, and every time you say, "I'm doing okay," without fully explaining what okay really means, that can shape your future. If anything from this video struck a nerve, use that feeling. Use it to take action. Double-check your records. Educate yourself about DBQs, re-exams, and the red flags VA reviewers look for. If you're uncertain about something in your claim file, ask, get clarity, get support. There are people out there, VSOs, attorneys, fellow veterans, who can help you navigate this without getting blindsided. Because in a system that sometimes feels stacked against you, knowledge is your strongest defense. And your voice? That's your most powerful weapon. Thank you for spending time with us today. If this video helped you or someone you care about, please consider liking and sharing it. It might be the one thing that saves someone from losing what they fought so hard to get. Drop a comment below and let us know what part of this video opened your eyes or gave you something new to think about. And if you haven't already, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications. We're building a community where veterans get the truth, not just the textbook answers. Your support helps us keep creating content that informs, empowers, and protects those who've given so much. You've already served. Now it's time to make sure that service is respected, not just with words, but with the benefits you've earned. Stay vigilant, stay informed, and we'll see you in the next video.